All right, so last week we talked a lot about bringing models in and applying materials, that sort of stuff. And we started looking at placing landscaping. So I think we did more of just a lot of hypothetical kind of stuff. Uh, and so maybe we'll just do a quick rundown of actually placing um, landscaping around. Uh, uh, yeah, so we'll just throw in some quick landscaping, and then we'll get into creating scenes and some effects, and we'll try and getting a little bit of a late start. We'll try and do that a little quicker today. Um, actually, uh, I'm gonna do one other thing real. Yeah. All right. So one of the things I was talking about is just that this idea that you could bring multiple SketchUp models in. You don't have to bring just one model. You could bring things in pieces. And so I'm just gonna save these two components real quick. Um, save as, and then we'll get into the good stuff. This will be just a quick little thing. And it's really just to show you more of conceptually the way that this works. So like we talked about, to bring in the model, you go to this imports button down here, select object, and here you go to import new model. And we brought in our model. Similarly, like I was saying, we can bring in whatever we want. I'm just going to name this Rocco one. Oops. Exactly. And yeah, and so that's one of the things we were talking about. Nothing that we necessarily would do, but it's a good concept to understand that if you've ever seen people do construction 4D modeling, where it talks about the process of building something like this SketchUp model. Instead of bringing the SketchUp model in as one complete model, they would bring the walls in as its own model, the foundation as its own model, the windows, all that kind of stuff, so that they can put each piece of the model on its own layer, and then from there you can create movement and put the model together in kind of live time, if you will. But anyway, so now you can see that bringing in an extra model. Let me deselect all. I now can bring, this is a SketchUp model that we brought in, so I can bring these rocks anywhere we want. I can make copies of it. And so it's just the idea that don't get locked into you have to have just one SketchUp model, that you can have multiples. Just to make it look a little different, we can rotate it. Uh, Independence, like something like this, if you have it already placed in your model and you have it exactly where you want, fine, no problem. But if you want to be a little bit more free flowing, or you just need a model that you designed to be independent, uh, maybe getting into interiors, you want to be able to control a chair that you designed and turn it and move it and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you can do that in SketchUp in of itself, but it's just more of the idea of I'm trying to show you all the things that are possible so that you have as many tools in your tool belt so that when you're trying to solve a problem, you know what can and can't happen, that sort of thing. And that's really the idea. Um, so I'm not going to take too long on this, but I'm going to, but not that. I want objects, and we're going to grab our nature objects, and we're just going to grab a couple trees. Um, I'm going to use some nice palms. And again, in case you don't know, you can always do like a search for palm, or you can do like coconut, and it'll find the coconut palms for you, which sometimes makes it a little easier to search for things. Uh, and like we talked about last time, you can add in individually just by single clicking. If I control click, it'll add in 10 at a time. And just add some over here. Control click. You just add some palms in. And all I'm going to do real quick is I just want to be able to hide my my horizon lines. So I'm just going to grab some small leafy trees. Just for this exercise, I'm not really caring what it is. And I'm going to use my mask placement tool, which is that line on the bottom. You'll see it right there. And I'm just going to run a line all the way across the side of the property. And I'm going to add in just a large number of them just to really fill this in. All right, so we got some low trees in there. You can always randomize your direction. We talked about that in the last video. Just make it look a little prettier. And maybe I'll do the same thing with some bigger trees. And if you don't know, you can actually have multiple trees inside of a mask placement. But since we already did the little ones, I'm going to take those off. These actually look like they're smaller than the other ones. I mean, here we go. I'm going to grab these big ones. There we go. Yes, so this is just really trying to, again, just hide my horizon, that's all. Just so that when we're down here, it just makes it look a little nicer. You know, maybe we get some smaller bushes. Again, just to try and hide. This is obviously not a very complete model from that perspective, so, you know, it's usually a lot more going on around where you are, but it's important to be able to hide. It just makes the model look a lot nicer, in my opinion. And see, it added the big trees as well as the bushes. So I'm going to remove the big trees and just let these little bushes hang out down here. My happy little trees. There we go. And again, this is all just what I'm doing just for this particular model. And it's really going to depend on your project of what you want. Let me add just a couple other little, say, nicer palms up here, just along the driveway. Again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. That's what this isn't really the point of what we're doing. You know, that's good for now. And maybe just for we can always come back after we set everything up, you know, make everything look good and add more landscaping in and all that kind of stuff. But just to get a couple, little bit of bushes going on. And I think they're a little big, so maybe I'm going to scale them down. There we go. All right, so at this point, let's say that we went through and added in all the landscaping that we wanted to add in. I'm just going to add a couple more of these. And that, you know, we're happy with the landscaping and whatnot. We want to start putting together a scene that we want to export out. To do that, you click on the photo icon here on the right. So we're in build mode right now. So this would be equivalent to like a model space in AutoCAD. Then we have photo mode next to it. We have movie mode, and then we have panorama mode, which creates VR, VR-ish at least kind of stuff. And we will definitely touch on that. And it's something I think that would be really cool. And Shanine, I think this is something you and I spoke maybe about a year ago about. I would love to be able to figure out how to incorporate these into our website, because right now it's hosted by Lumion, and I don't necessarily want to link from our site to Lumion. But if we can find a way to embed this into our site, that'd be super cool. And so it's something I'm going to research. And the way Mitch is talking about wanting to really create dynamic marketing kind of stuff, this would really fit right into it. But we will touch on it here and how to create them, and then from there we can figure out how we can use them. So yeah, so we're in build mode, and we want to go to photo mode. And this is, when we go into photo mode, this is where we're really going to control the sun and the clouds. We've talked before that you can do it here, and it kind of does it globally, but I always find it better to very specifically control it inside of your picture. So I clicked on photo. So now we're in, theoretically, we're in paper space to coordinate it with AutoCAD. And the first thing I do is its preset comes in at 15 millimeter camera focal length. SketchUp's standard is 35. So you'll see that this looks like we're looking through a telephoto lens at this, and I think it's way too sharp of a viewing angle, in my opinion. So I always adjust this up to, I don't do it specific, somewhere between 30 and 35. And this is going to match much closer to what we're used to seeing in SketchUp. And Felicia, for your use, when we do interiors, I tend to bump this up to 60. So you're using a very wide angle lens for interiors, because otherwise you're looking at such a narrow scope, you're not getting a big picture of what's going on. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I've done some testing, like iPhones, when you take a picture, that tends to be at about a 60-degree angle, viewing angle, or 60 millimeter viewing angle, if you will. So an iPhone is going to be more along a 60, where 35 millimeter is more of like a typical camera. Again, just things to be aware of. The one thing I wish Lumion had that they don't is, like in SketchUp, how you can click the guy and say, I want to stand here. Maybe someday they'll do that, but at this point you kind of have to eyeball it and just move around until you get to, say, the view that you want. Controlling this stuff, there are hotkeys, and some that I use, like Q, the letter Q, will move you up. E will move you down. W will move you forward, and S will move you backwards. You can do some of this with the mouse as well, but especially when I'm trying to create a view angle, I can more precisely control that. I can control my view angle using those keys. Once I have kind of the stationary standpoint I like, if I use my right click on the mouse and hold it down, this lets me turn my head. So I'm not moving, but the camera will move basically where I'm trying to look at. And then obviously if you scroll forward and backward, that will kind of walk you forward and backward as well. I'm gonna change my position. I want to get something a little more like this. So let's say we're happy with this. This is the angle we want. Now we want to be able to take a snapshot of this, and this is just like SketchUp where we're creating scenes. It's the same concept of what we're going to do. You can only have, it looks like 100 preset image scenes. So you have what they call photo sets. There's 10 photo sets of 10. And so there's no, whenever I do testing, I tend to put those, say, on like photo sets 8, 9, and 10. And my primary ones that are ones that I'm going to use, I'll try to stick with photo set 1 and 2. Just the way I think about it, just to put it out there. So if you ever see anything in mine, photo sets that are later, those are just testing things out. So again, say this is the one we really like. I am going to click on this camera icon, which is store camera, and you'll see it just takes a snapshot and it is now embedded in there. If I turn my camera and I'm anywhere else in the model, if I click on restore camera, it'll plot me right back there. So again, it just works just like scenes. So really the power we're going to gain with using Lumion, and what we really need to be able to focus on to create our look and our style, is going to be layering effects. And the power this is going to have is we can do a lot of manipulation to this photo in pre-processing versus creating an image, bringing it into Photoshop, and doing post-processing. Because by overlaying this stuff from a pre-process standpoint, no matter how many times we move the camera, no matter how many pictures we want to take, we can overlay that same pre-process information and not have to do that to every single image in post-process. And really, to me, that's the goal. Yeah, you can make an argument that you can make a much better image by doing great post-process work, but I would also make the argument that we don't have time to do that. In the amount of stuff that we do and how quickly we move and how quickly we need to turn around marketing material and presentation material, sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. So those of you that have that ability, that's great, and definitely keep pushing that kind of stuff. But the more that we can put this stuff into pre-process mode, I think the better off we are. And that's kind of the mindset I'm coming at from all this. So the first effect, I'm clicking on new effect. I'm actually going to go to camera, and this bottom one here is 2-point perspective, and then I'm going to turn it on. And this is just exactly what it sounds like. It's basically eliminating the z-axis perspective, so all the lines running straight up and down. And even once I do that, maybe I want to take a little further step back, and so I'm just gonna, I have a tree in my way so I can't go too far, so I'm gonna do that, and then I'm just gonna restore my camera. So I'm gonna save over that previous one and take that camera shot again. So then the second one is going to be, I'm going to go to world, and I'm going to add in a sun effect. And this is where I can really control the sun. The two main ones that you're going to deal with are height and heading. So I usually try and find the heading I like first. You can choose what side of your building you want to be highlighted. So you can see my sun is now coming from the upper right to the bottom left, and it's putting this facade, the one with the balcony, into sunlight, and putting the smaller wall into shade. So I'm really highlighting the nicer piece of the architecture. So I'm going to stick with that. And then we can control the height. If I go all the way up, then we're at a perfect high noon. And if I drop it down to, say, 0.1, then we're going to be at roughly a sunrise or sunset. There's really no difference in Lumion between the two. It's either sunrise or sunset. I have a lot of trees in the way, so you're not really getting a good shot. And that actually reminds me of something I want to talk about that I skipped over. So right now I'm in photo mode, and I want to go back to build mode. And so I'm going to click on build, and I'm back into my build world. And for those of you that don't know, Lumion actually does have layers and works with layers. They're not hugely important, but I do tend to use them, and I don't have a specific setup, but it should be easy enough, and we'll get something that'll be consistent. Like layer 2, I'm going to click on, and you can see that the white eye highlights, so it shows that I'm on layer 2. And I'm going to change the name of layer 2, and I'm going to call it landscaping. And then I'm actually going to highlight layer 3 and change layer 3, and I'm going to call this site landscaping. Because as we talked about with SketchUp, Sometimes we want our landscaping on, but we have a lot of site landscaping that's not specific to our job that we just don't really care about. So I'm just going to come in here. Actually, I think there might be an easier way. Um, I know I didn't use any of these bushes within my landscaping. They're all site landscaping. So I believe I can use the pencil tool, uh, or is it not the context, the wrench, and I can go to selection, and I can go to select all similar, and it selected all of that type of bush. And so you can see that I'm on layer 3, and when I do that with these selected, you see this arrow pops up. If I click on this arrow, it'll move all that stuff to that layer. And you'll see that if I click on the eye, which turns that layer off, you'll see all of those bushes will disappear. So I'm going to do that again with the other tree I did. And even with the layer off, I can still move them. And so I'm just going to do that. And then same thing with my big tree selection, select all similar, and we'll move that to that layer as well. Sometimes it selects so many that I can only move so many at a time. And you got to do it multiple times. I know it's a weird little glitch. I have this one lone tree that doesn't want to go. That's okay. There we go. And so now with all of that gone, it's actually pretty easy to come in and just select all of this other landscaping. And we'll move that to layer 2 just to move that all over there. And layer 1 is what I usually keep the house on. And so the reason why I want to do that is if I go back into photo mode and go back to our house, you'll see that with my layer turned off, the sun actually comes through all of that massive amount of trees I had. And so I want to show you that you can control layers within Lumion and how and why you should use them. And 2, that you might want to do it for a particular scene. So even if those trees do exist in this world, I might want to be able to create this rendering that has a nice sunset, and so I can turn those trees off and really control everything. So here you can see we got a really nice, golden hour kind of idea. And then going back to the sun, we went from high noon to basically 00, which is sunrise, sunset. And if we drop it all the way down to -1, then we're at a total opposite of sunrise, with the sun on the complete opposite side of the world, and we're at nighttime. And if you wanted to, there is actually the same way we added the sun, we can actually add the moon in as well. And so I can control where the moon is. So I'm going to drop the moon into my scene right about there. Since we're coming up on Halloween, we'll make a moonlit scene. And we can control the size of the moon as well. So, so just like the sun, though, if you put the moon behind, you're not getting any moonlight cast onto your project. So it's just one of those things that you're going to be in shadow again, even though we're talking about a night scene, you're still going to be in shadow. So you just have to have like other lighting systems, and we're going to get into that once we get into doing night renders. But those are not going to be our main concern right now. Getting good daylight renders is really what we're going to deal with. So if I added in an effect that I don't care about, I'm just going to click on the wrench and say remove and get rid of it. And I'm going to put my sun back up to a decent height. And again, that's really going to be more project specific. So you have your sun brightness that you can make it a super bright sunny day and really wash your project out, or you can knock the sun brightness all the way down, if you're trying to get more of like a mood effect. So it's just another thing you can control. Some other effects, some standard ones would be going to weather and adding in clouds. And again, even though I was showing you how you can control the cloud from build mode and from a larger perspective, like a global perspective, this will control it per scene, because we might want to be able to control where the clouds are sitting within our model. And if you move the position thing, it'll make it as if the clouds are rolling across the sky until you find a view that you like. And there's just all kinds of settings, and just play with them, have fun. There's no real right or wrong with the clouds. It's all going to be a matter of what you want. So really, these three, there's some other ones I use quite often, but those three, make sure there's nothing else, are really the ones that are the main ones. And let's just make sure there's nothing else. Maybe shadow, actually. Let me do that. Actually, there's two more. So I'll do shadow. And the shadow, you can control the coloring. So you can see here the shadows are very gray. And if you pop this up, they turn a little more bluish. And I think if you go down, they just get more gray down and more blue up. So you can make it a little bit of a cooler scene, I guess. You can control the brightness of them. So you can bring it all the way up and kind of wash the shadows out. Or if you bring them all the way down, it makes it very, very dark. I'm not really sure the intent behind the interior exterior, but I notice I get a little bit better shadows. Maybe further to the left, this is an interior rendering, and all the way to the right is an exterior. I've never really looked into what this one actually means. Omni Shadow works almost like a dirt map, where it's trying to find those edges and really accentuate the shadow and those edge marks. And I've never really had to deal with shadow correction. So I'm actually going to add one more later, but let's say these are the four that are our main consistent ones we use all the time. The nice thing is you can click on this wrench up here, go to File, Save, and we're going to have on the server, in fact, I might already have it right here, inside of the SKP folder that we all use, there's a Lumion effects, and I have a whole host of effects in here. So I'm just going to save this one out as a test mode or whatever. We click save. So then you'll see that if I go to another empty scene, so I just clicked on this empty tab, everything kind of gets erased. And let's say we want to get a nice backyard shot. And for this one, I'm going to go to build mode, and I want my layer 3 turned back on so that I have my background. I'm going to pop my focal length up to about 35, and there's nothing really of interest to look at back here, but we'll pretend there is. And so we'll find our scene that we like, we'll take our snapshot, and now I can go File, Load, and then we can find our test mode, and if I double click on it, it loads all those things back in. So it's really nice, and the whole idea is that once we find settings, like a standard settings that we all like, that obviously can be continually tweaked, but we find our standard settings, you load your model in, add some materials, load in the effects, and you're done, and that's really it. So I'm just going to restore my camera and go back to the first one. And I'm going to do one more effect, and then we'll just look at some fun, cool things to play around with. What do I want? I want to go to reflections right here, the one that looks like a house sitting on water. And this is going to add reflection planes. And before I add any, I'm actually going to, let's see if I render this out and we can look at the difference between the two. So I'm just going to do a quick version of the desktop. So you can see the image size, that basically small, medium, large, extra large. For our purposes, I'm just going to do a desktop version for us to look at. Go to my dump folder, and we're going to call this test 01. And so if you guys haven't rendered anything with Lumion, uh, literally, I've actually already finished before you guys even saw it pop up. Like, it really doesn't take long at all. Um, and I've actually heard that 8 is even faster. So let's see here, where's my test? There it is. So we're going to open that up. So here's my rendering that we just did. And so you see the windows, and let's see if we create a second one real quick. We'll go. So I'm going to click on the pencil to add reflections. And if you see on the bottom left here, it'll say there's a plus sign. This is where we can add a reflection plane. So I'm going to click plus, and I'm going to hover over a piece of glass. And now anything that's on this particular plane will and is glass will become reflective. And so you see when I click that there's a whole series of these blue hatchings, if you will. So all of those doors and windows on that wall are now reflective. But you also see that the door and this window is not, in neither of these. So we have to add another reflective plane. So we'll do that for that door. And you can see it does this upper window as well. So I'm going to add another one for my window on the right. And some of these tower ones may not need them just because of the angle they're at, but you know, we're going to add them in anyway. And just be aware that I think you can only add in a max of 10 reflection planes. So you really want to be selective as to which ones you add. If you have a pool, you can actually add it on water as well, and it really makes the water hyper reflective. So if you have a very calm, you know, pool, and you really want to add this kind of reflective quality to your pool, you can put a reflective plane on it. Or if you want it to be more subtle, you can just leave it off. So we'll click the check mark to say we have all reflective planes on. So we're good to go, and I'm gonna render this one out again real quick. Call this test 02. And this will actually take longer to render because it's dealing with reflective planes, but again, mine's already done. And so let's open that one up, and we will see if we can compare the two. So you can see the difference. So here is the non-reflective one, and you can see that everything looks decent. These windows in the top, you know, it has a decent look to it. I mean, it looks dead inside. There's no lights or anything, but that's kind of whatever. But even looking at the front door is really telling. You can see that there's a reflection of a tree, but it's not very delineated, if you will. It's very pixelized. And now if I jump to the other one we just rendered, it became hyper reflective, and I think because in shadows it's seeing through. But again, looking at this window up here, it now looks much more alive because you're getting reflection of the sky, you're getting reflection of the palm tree in here. It just you can just see the difference in quality of reflection. And so it's just something to be aware of. And it's a speed issue that they kept reflectivity, I think, off so that you can add it on if and when you want it from a speed perspective. So even though, what am I looking for? So even though reflection in of itself could be a standard part of our effects stack, the actual reflection planes wouldn't be, because that would be very specific to your job. And now just to do some fun stuff. So say we want to do some testing. I'm going to jump to my photo set number 10. And you can see I'm on the exact same photo spot as my image number 1. And so I'm going to take a shot here so I can keep that exact spot. Now, you'll see that my 2-point perspective and all that stuff is gone because this is a new photo, but we're just going to add that in real quick. Go to test mode. And so now we're kind of back to where we were, which is great. We want the same sun, the same shadows, same clouds, all that good kind of stuff, just because we want to have a baseline in which to compare things to. And this is where you can really have some fun. And um, I think we've talked about before that I want to put together a whole series of images of the same project for everybody to look at and determine, which is the best method for us to move forward with as a firm. Even though we always have multiple methods we can do things, but from having tools in our pocket ready to go. So if you go to sketch mode, you have painting, watercolor, sketch, oil painting, cartoon. I mean, all different kinds of versions, and you can actually do multiple overlays of things as well. But we just look at sketch mode. And Shanine, this is the one that Mitch really liked of Isla Bahia. It's just this sketch mode. And even in here, you can see everything is just middle across the board so that we can add in a different level of accuracy. And you can see, it's hard for you guys to see with a little bit of a delay, but if I go all the way up, all the lines are a little sharper. If I go all the way down, the lines are a little more blurry. And then sketch style, I think it's just how, like more like the amount of ink, I guess, you use. Use a little bit more. You change your contrast, your coloring, I guess the brightness of it, the vibrancy, I guess I should say. And then, so there's just multiple ways that you can change this until we find a version that we like. So there's that one. You can actually even add multiples on top of each other. So say we want to keep that one, that we can come to another empty spot, and we're going to reload our same base version, and then we're going to add a new effect, and maybe let's do painting. And here we can adjust the this smear size, the style. I mean, it's just all kinds of things that you can adjust. And so now you can see I can click on my first one, and I have my sketch style, click on my second one, and I have my painting style. And again, I think you can, actually I know you can overlay them, so I'm just going to do one more. And again, I just loaded in my test base stack effects. We'll go to new effects, we'll add in sketch, and then I'm going to add a new effect and do watercolor. And so this one now has both sketch and watercolor overlaid on top of each other. And so you can even add multiple effects onto things and really start creating something different as well. So again, it's just not saying that this is a good one or not. There's just the idea of what can and can't be done. I don't know, I mean, that's not even too bad. So we'll sit, store that camera, and yeah, so that's it's kind of some of the cool effects that you can do. I haven't used these a ton yet, but again, just let you know what's available there. So going back to our original one, some other effects that I like to use would be, let's see here, style, I believe it is. Yes. Under style, this analog color lab is a really nice one. It gives like just all kinds of different filters, if you will. So even if I'm going to hide this one real quick. So you can see that this is the very standard, very standard kind of image. And if I turn my analog color lab back on, instantly it has this slightly more old world effect to it. And for every notch I jump up on the slider, it will give me a different effect. And so this isn't like a amount of it, because you can see I can change how much is applied, but these are the varying different styles within it. This one's a little bit more of like this, like a vintage bloom effect, I guess. This one's more like a washed out. Uh, so even in this, you can really get different filter effects and really get a mood for your image. So that's another good one I really like to use. Color correction is a decent one. If um, just something isn't really popping right. Don't really use any of those. The depth of field is kind of cool. I'm just gonna move real quick, and so say we're behind this tree right here. See if I remember how to actually do this. I'm gonna say that I want, if you see, I'm putting this green arrow on the balcony. I'm gonna say the balcony is what I want to focus on, and then check it. And so that's where I'm focusing. And so I can change the amount. And by doing so, everything that's near me really starts to blur out, and I'm very focused in on the balcony. And I can change the focal distance to really sharpen up the balcony itself and really start blurring everything else out. And again, you can just kind of play with these things so that you get like the foreground background. This is all the way down is hyper blurry, and all the way up is much more sharp. So even then you can control all the different pieces and really start creating something pretty nice. You even turn autofocus on, which will really focus on the piece that you added to. So these are more of the, I guess, secondary pieces that start to bring your image to another level, and just add a little bit more realism, a little bit more almost warmth. There's a lot more warmth to this image just by simply adding the depth of field to it, in my opinion. You can do fisheye lenses. You can do near clipping, the near clipping I think you can use to actually create sections, but again, I don't really use it a ton. You can do exposure, and it gets just like what it sounds, just like an AutoCAD. If you, or excuse me, not AutoCAD, Photoshop. If you knock it up, it'll really overexpose your image, or knock it down, it'll underexpose it. And so it's just one that you can really just start to play with, if there's, to see if there adds any value. I've used it when I've tried to do some night renderings. You can underexpose it a little bit, and it just adds a cool effect to it. Yeah, I mean, that's really about it. I mean, again, you can add in as many of these things as you can possibly want. Like I can add rain and make it look like it's raining. Or which I guess is good for you guys, but in my case, maybe I'll add snow. So let's take that off. Yeah, so that's not honestly, this effect stack is not a halfway. It's a half decent effect. It's getting a decently romantic look. I mean, and it fits this architecture. This may or may not work for modern architecture, and that's something else we would probably need to look at, is creating a stack effects that works well for traditional architecture, and maybe a stacked effect that works better for modern architecture. Because again, I think this kind of old world romantic feel fits very well for this architecture. For this house that isn't necessarily the best architecture in the world. This was just a production home that we had worked on. This image makes it look really nice, to be honest. So we'll just save that, and so now that I like this, I can go here and I'm gonna save this effect stack, and we'll call this, just for the fun of it, traditional romantic. Done. And so now anytime we wanna, I can go back to my rear image here, and maybe I'll take another snapshot and just so we can see the difference. and go to File, Load, and I'm going to load in my traditional romantic, and all of those effects are now layered in. And the only thing different you might want to do is if I click on my reflections button, you see all my reflections are back in the front because they just stored that as part of my reflection package. And I don't want them there. I want them back here. So if I click on the number 5, you'll see a plane highlight green, and that's the green one is my number 5 plane. And if I click on number 5, it erases it. And same thing with 4, and then 3, and 2, and 1. I'm going to erase all of those panes, and then I'm going to start over and add a reflection plane. Let's go through this pretty quickly and just add all the ones I need back here. And looks like I'm missing one right here. There we go. And actually, let me, you know what, I'm gonna render this one, and then I'm gonna render the pool and just see if we notice a difference. We'll call this one test 03. And then I'm going to add a reflection plane to my pool. And we'll render this. And I think this rear shot is a good example of your renderings are really going to be only as good as your model, that there's not a whole lot back here. There's not a lot of life. And so the rendering itself is, no matter what kind of effects we put on it, the effects will only take it so far. It's only going to be as good as your model. So if we open up test 3, so this has reflections on the windows, and so you can see how reflective these windows are and how nice they're looking, very crisp. And if I go in and open test 4, let's see if I notice a difference with the pool, because that was really the only difference between the two. In this case, not a whole lot reflecting off of it to get a huge difference. But it definitely could, depending on the angle that you're taking your image from. So, I mean, that's a quick overview of taking pictures and adding in effects and all that sort of stuff. And really, it's going to come down to just experimentally playing with all of this stuff. You know, I have a lot of effects that I've been using, and I'm still trying to find the best ones. And I'll definitely share those with you guys and what I think works. And but I would love to see what you guys come up with so that we can come up with different styles. Yeah, so it's 1 o'clock now, so I think maybe we'll end, and then next week we will do look at videos and doing the VR stuff next week, because you know, unless you guys got 10 more minutes, want to look at it, and we'll do something else next week. Yeah, because videos, actually, I was going to jump in and do it real quick, unless you guys got to be somewhere. I'm going to go back. What's nice is, you know, just how simple videos can be. So I'm going to go back to my first shot. And so this way I have my camera placed where I wanted. And I'm going to go to movie, and I'm going to say, get rid of that guy. If I click on record, I can now take my snapshot number 1, and I'm going to take a picture. And everybody likes to do the, I'm going to walk around my whole house and fly around it like a drone. What I like to try and do is create what I like to call dynamic stills, where I'm going to stand still, and I took a snapshot as is, and then not moving, but using my right mouse button, I'm going to click and hold and turn my head and say maybe focus from the balcony more towards the tower, and I'm going to take another shot, and then I'm going to make just one more slight adjustment, a very, very small adjustment. And that's just really going to give me a nice smooth transition when it creates the video. You may or may not see it very well in this live viewing of it because of the delay, but you'll see it better on the YouTube playback. But when I click this check button, so that's all I'm doing to create it. I'm just giving the point of focus, and then when I click playback, um, it's and if I click play, uh, hopefully you'll see what I mean, like, by getting this dynamic still, that it's just really this image, and you're focused in on this one image, this one location, so that if you're really trying to look at the balcony and understand the balcony, you're not flying around the house and only get like a second and a half look at the balcony. You're getting a full 8 seconds, even though the image itself is moving. You're really starting to tell a story, and then you stitch together these multiple dynamic views to really start to tell a story of your project. And the other nice thing, and I'm going to end here, and we can spend more time on videos next week, but the other thing I want to show is I can click on this camera or this wrench icon, and just like before, I can come back in and say load effects, and I'm going to click on my traditional romantic that we just exported, and now it's overlaying those effects onto my video. So that's another, again, once we really create this layer effect, the stack effects that we like, we can really hold on to this and use this throughout both images and videos. It just becomes such a great time saver and consistency across the board for all of us. Yeah, so maybe we'll spend a little bit more time on videos and then panoramics next week. But I just really want to show you like how easy it is to transition from images to videos. Any questions on anything we've been over today? Yeah, I mean, what we'll get into next week is, now that we're into videos, is creating keyframes. So for instance, like this depth of field, it's a singular depth of field. We're looking from one place the whole video, where if you've ever seen it, where videos start off by saying, but maybe looking at this tree that's right here in front of us in focus, where the house itself is out of focus, you can use the depth of field keyframing, so you're focused in on the tree, and then as it starts to morph through, your depth of field changes back to the house. So again, it just really creates this dynamic feeling to this image. And you can do that across the board with so many things. And so that's really what we can talk about, adding in people that move, cars that turn, all that good kind of stuff. We'll really get into videos a little bit more next week. Yeah, so that's about it. Unless you guys got any other questions, I think that's it. You got it. All right. Bye, guys.